A big break. Republicans breaking with Trump on Epstein. House GOP leaders bracing tonight for a significant number of Republican defections. Republicans going to break from Trump and support a bipartisan bill calling for the release of the Jeffrey Epstein files.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would. I'd be inclined to do the Epstein. I'd have no problem with it.
Well, he's got a big problem with it. He now has the power to follow through.
Why didn't Trump just release these? Just release them. Just release them, right? Like now he's in a position of being like singled out as the only one, allegedly, as opposed to one of a slew of names. The Democrats, of course, are going to make a ton of hay over it. And I don't know that there's any there whatsoever, but I concede that they sound bad.
Okay, so picture this. You're Mike Johnson. You're the Speaker of the House. You've got one of the most powerful positions in American government, and you're trying desperately to keep a lid on something explosive, something that could blow up your party, embarrass powerful people, and create absolute chaos heading into the 2026 midterms. You've been stalling, delaying, doing everything you can to prevent a vote on releasing the Jeffrey Epstein files, the full government records that document Epstein's connections to politicians, business people, and who knows who else. You think you've got it under control. You think you can keep pushing this off until people forget about it or move on to something else. And then suddenly, everything falls apart. The pressure becomes too much. Your own party members start breaking ranks. Democrats are going nuclear. The public is demanding answers. And you realize you can't stop it anymore. The vote is happening whether you like it or not. Can you imagine the panic, the absolute dread of knowing that files you desperately wanted to keep buried are about to become public? That's where Mike Johnson found himself this week. And honestly, it's one of the most dramatic political moments we've seen in a long time. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust headlines anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
And what she's talking about there is just that 20,000 pages of emails, right, that include Trump's name thousands of times. They make it sound like Epstein and Trump were very close for a very long time. Now, we know there was a period of time that they were essentially best friends. Many have described them that way to us. But even a whole decade after Trump said he dumped Epstein from Mar-a-Lago for being a, quote, creep,
this bill from actually being taken up for a vote. Then all of a sudden you see Speaker Johnson saying that he's going to expedite it. It's going to be brought to the floor as early next week.
Here's what went down. For weeks, maybe months, there's been growing pressure to release all government files related to Jeffrey Epstein. You know Epstein, the financier who ran a sex trafficking ring, had connections to the rich and powerful, and mysteriously died in federal custody before he could face trial. The guy whose black book allegedly contained names of presidents, princes, CEOs, all kinds of elite figures. There have been some documents released already through various lawsuits and investigations, but the full government files, the complete records held by federal agencies, have remained secret. And a lot of people think that's because those files would embarrass powerful individuals who don't want their Epstein connections made public. So there's been a push in Congress, bipartisan actually, to force the release of everything, to have a vote that would compel federal agencies to declassify and publish all Epstein-related documents. No more secrecy, no more protection for the powerful, just full transparency about who Epstein was connected to and what the government knows about it. And Mike Johnson, that speaker, had the power to control when or if that vote happened. He could schedule it or delay it. He could let it come to the floor or keep it buried in committee. And for a while, that's exactly what he did. He stalled, he delayed, he kept the House schedule in a way that prevented the vote from happening. There were even reports that he deliberately kept the House closed and delayed swearing in a Democratic congressman who had pledged to force the Epstein files vote. That's how desperate he was to stop this. But then the wall started closing in. First, House Democrats released new emails between Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, his associate, who's now in prison for sex trafficking. In these emails, Epstein refers to Donald Trump as, quote, the dog that hasn't barked. That cryptic phrase set off alarm bells everywhere. What did Epstein mean by that? What was Trump supposed to bark about? What did Epstein know about Trump that would make that reference meaningful? The emails raised way more questions than they answered, and they put massive pressure on Republicans to support releasing everything. Then you had bipartisan momentum building. It wasn't just Democrats pushing for this anymore. Republican members were starting to say, yeah, we should release these files. We should know the truth. Public pressure was mounting. Social media was exploding with demands for transparency. Epstein survivors were speaking out, confronting politicians, asking why the government was protecting whoever's in those files, and Johnson realized he couldn't hold the line anymore. He couldn't keep stalling without looking like he was actively covering something up, so he caved. He announced that the House will vote on forcing the release of the Epstein files, and in a statement, he said, and I'm quoting here, "There's nothing to hide. Let's just get this done and move it on," which, let's be honest, is exactly what someone says when they're trying to minimize something they're terrified about. If there's really nothing to hide, why did you spend weeks preventing this vote from happening? Why all the delays and procedural games? The answer is obvious. Johnson was afraid of what's in those files, and now he's stuck. The vote is happening. It's almost certainly going to pass because it has bipartisan support, and whatever's in those documents is about to become public. And here's the thing that makes this so explosive. We already know from previous disclosures that Trump had connections to Epstein. They were photographed together at parties. Trump made comments about Epstein liking younger women. There are flight logs showing Trump on Epstein's plane, but the full extent of that relationship has never been clear. How close were they really? What did they talk about? What did Trump know about Epstein's activities? Those are questions that the full government files might answer, and that's terrifying for Trump and his allies. Because if those files show a closer relationship than Trump has admitted to, if they reveal conversations or activities that contradict Trump's public statements, it could be devastating. Not legally necessarily, but politically. Heading into 2026, with Trump trying to maintain his grip on the Republican Party, the last thing he needs is a massive scandal about his Epstein connections dominating every news cycle. And Mike Johnson knows this. He knows that releasing these files could fracture the party, embarrass Trump, and create chaos at the worst possible time. That's why he fought so hard to stop it, and that's why he's absolutely stunned now that it's happening anyway. The vote is coming, the files are going to be released, and there's nothing he can do to stop it anymore. Let's break down exactly what's going on here. Alright, so let's dive deeper into this whole situation, because there are layers here that most people aren't talking about. The media is covering the basic story. Epstein files, congressional vote, Trump connections, all that. But they're missing the political chess game that's been playing out behind the scenes. They're not explaining why Mike Johnson was so desperate to stop this vote, or what the release of these files could mean for the power structure in Washington. So let's get into it. First, you need to understand what we're actually talking about when we say the Epstein files. These aren't just random documents. These are comprehensive government records from multiple federal agencies, the FBI, the Department of Justice, potentially the CIA, other intelligence agencies. Records that document Epstein's activities, his connections, his travel, his financial dealings, everything the government knew about him over decades. Some of this stuff has come out through lawsuits. Victims have sued, documents have been unsealed, we've gotten glimpses of Epstein's network, but the full government files have remained classified or sealed, and the suspicion is that they're being kept secret, not for national security reasons, but to protect powerful people who don't want their names associated with Epstein. Now, there's a legitimate debate about privacy and due process here. Just because someone knew Epstein or attended a party where he was present doesn't mean they were involved in his crimes. Releasing names without context could destroy innocent people's reputations. But on the other hand, if the government has evidence of wrongdoing, if these files show that powerful individuals participated in or enabled Epstein's trafficking operation, the public has a right to know. That's the tension at the heart of this whole fight. And Mike Johnson has been on the side of keeping things secret. Why? Well, there are a few theories. The most obvious is that he's trying to protect Trump. The Trump-Epstein connection is well documented, but not fully understood. They were friends in the 90s and early 2000s. Trump has made comments praising Epstein's social life. There are photos, videos, flight records showing contact between them. But Trump has also said he fell out with Epstein years ago, banned him from Mar-a-Lago, wasn't involved in any of Epstein's criminal activities. And to be fair, there's no public evidence that Trump participated in Epstein's sex trafficking. No victims have accused Trump of wrongdoing in connection with Epstein, but the full government files might provide more context about that relationship. And if that context is damaging, even if it's not criminal, it could hurt Trump politically. Johnson, as a Trump ally and as Speaker, trying to maintain party unity, has every incentive to keep those files buried. The second theory is that it's not just about Trump. There are probably other powerful Republicans, maybe even Democrats, who have Epstein connections they'd rather not become public. Members of Congress, donors, political operatives. Epstein moved in elite circles, and those circles included people from both parties. Releasing the files could embarrass multiple powerful figures, and Johnson, as a leader trying to manage his caucus and maintain coalitions, doesn't want to deal with that chaos. Better to keep it all secret and avoid the fallout. The third theory is that Johnson's worried about what this precedent sets. If Congress can force the release of sealed government files about Epstein, what else can they force the release of? What other secrets might have to come out? There's a whole culture in Washington of keeping things classified or sealed to protect the powerful. And once you start breaking that culture, once you establish that public pressure can force transparency, it becomes harder to keep other stuff hidden. So Johnson's been playing defense. He's been using his power as speaker to prevent the vote. And for a while it worked, but then came the emails. House Democrats got their hands on communications between Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, his accomplice who recruited and groomed victims for him. And in these emails, Epstein makes this cryptic reference to Trump as the dog that hasn't barked. That phrase comes from a Sherlock Holmes story, where the key clue is that a dog didn't bark when it should have. It implies something significant that didn't happen, or someone who stayed silent when they should have spoken. So what was Epstein talking about? What did he expect Trump to do or say that Trump didn't? Was it about staying quiet about Epstein's activities? Was it about not cooperating with investigators? Was it about some business or political deal? We don't know. The email doesn't provide context, but it's a bombshell because it suggests Epstein had expectations of Trump, that there was some understanding or relationship where Trump's silence or action mattered to Epstein. And that raises all kinds of questions about what the full government files might reveal. Democrats pounced on this. They held press conferences. They released the emails publicly. They demanded that all Epstein files be made available so the public can understand the full context. And they started building momentum for a vote, not just among Democrats, but among some Republicans too. Because here's the thing. A lot of Republicans don't want to be seen as covering up for Epstein or protecting people connected to sex trafficking. That's political poison. Even if they're worried about what the files might reveal, they're more worried about being accused of a cover-up. So bipartisan support started building. Members from both parties started saying, yeah, we should vote on this. We should release the files. Transparency is important. And suddenly Johnson's in an impossible position. If he continues blocking the vote, he looks like he's actively covering something up. The headlines write themselves, Speaker protects Epstein's secrets. That's devastating. But if he allows the vote, the files are going to be released, and whoever's embarrassed by them is going to blame Johnson for letting it happen. He's damned either way. So he chose the path that looks slightly better optically. He announced the vote would happen. He said there's nothing to hide, framed it as just getting it done and moving on, trying to minimize the significance, trying to act like this is no big deal, just routine transparency. But everyone knows it's not routine. Everyone knows this is a massive political moment, because once those files are public, once everyone can see who Epstein was connected to and what the government knew about it, the fallout is going to be enormous. And Johnson's privately terrified about what that fallout looks like. According to reports, he's been warning GOP leaders that this could open a can of worms, that it could fracture the party, that it could give Democrats ammunition heading into 2026. And he's probably right. Think about what happens if those files show, for example, that Trump had more extensive contact with Epstein than he's admitted, that he was at more events, made more trips, had more conversations than the public record shows. Even if there's no evidence of criminal wrongdoing, it creates a narrative problem. It makes Trump look like he lied or minimized the relationship. And Democrats will hammer that nonstop. Or imagine if the files show that other prominent Republicans had Epstein connections, maybe a senator who's up for re-election in 2026, maybe a governor who's being talked about as a presidential candidate, maybe a major donor who's been funding GOP campaigns. Any of those revelations would be explosive. They force Republicans to either defend those individuals or distance themselves, and either choice creates division. That's the nightmare scenario Johnson's been trying to avoid, but now he can't avoid it anymore. The vote is happening. The files are going to be released, and the chips are going to fall wherever they fall. Now let's talk about Trump's response to all this, because his position has been all over the place. Initially, he was against releasing the files. He made comments suggesting it was unnecessary, that it would violate privacy, that the whole thing was politically motivated. But then, as pressure built and it became clear the vote was going to happen, he suddenly shifted. He started saying he doesn't care if the files are released, that he's got nothing to hide, that he actually supports transparency, which is a classic Trump move. When something bad is going to happen anyway, pretend you wanted it all along, act like you're in control, even when you're not. But here's the problem with that strategy. If the files do reveal damaging information about Trump, his flip-flop on releasing them makes him look even worse. He went from opposing release to supporting it, which suggests he's trying to get ahead of bad news. And voters aren't stupid. They can see through that. So Trump's attempted damage control might actually make the damage worse. Meanwhile, Democrats are having a field day with this. They're pointing to the emails, the connections, the attempts to block the vote, and saying, see, there's something to hide here. If there was nothing in these files, why would Republicans have fought so hard to keep them secret? And that's a powerful argument, because the behavior of Johnson and other GOP leaders suggests they know the files contain damaging information. Otherwise, why all the resistance? Why not just release everything immediately and say, look, We've got nothing to hide. The fact that they fought so hard to prevent release tells you they're worried about what's in there. So where does this leave us? The House vote is expected to pass. It has bipartisan support. Once it passes, federal agencies will be required to declassify and release the Epstein files within a certain time frame, probably a few months, and then the real fireworks begin. Journalists are going to go through every page looking for bombshells. Democrats are going to highlight anything that embarrasses Republicans. Republicans are going to try to spin or minimize whatever comes out, and the whole circus is going to dominate political coverage for weeks or months. It's exactly the kind of chaos Johnson was trying to avoid, but he couldn't stop it. The momentum became too strong. The political pressure became too intense, and now he's stuck watching as the very thing he feared most becomes reality. All right, let's break down what actually matters here, because this story has a lot of moving parts, a lot of political intrigue, a lot of speculation, but what are the core takeaways? What does this mean for Trump, for Johnson, for Republicans, for American politics more broadly? Let's get into it. First thing, and this is critical, the Epstein files are about to become public, whether anyone in power wants them to or not. That's huge. For years, these files have been kept secret, sealed by courts, classified by agencies, hidden behind privacy claims and national security justifications. And powerful people have benefited from that secrecy. They've been able to maintain their reputations, their positions, their influence without having to answer questions about their Epstein connections. But that era is ending. Once these files are released, once everyone can see who Epstein was connected to and what those connections entail, there's no putting that genie back in the bottle. Names are going to be public, relationships are going to be scrutinized, and anyone who had dealings with Epstein is going to have to explain themselves. That's a massive shift in transparency and accountability, and it sets a precedent for other sealed files, other secret records that the public has been demanding access to. Second thing, Mike Johnson's handling of this has been an absolute disaster politically. He tried to block the vote, he stalled, he used procedural tricks to prevent it from happening, and all of that just made him look like he was covering something up. If he had just allowed the vote immediately, if he had framed it as Republicans supporting transparency and having nothing to hide, he could have controlled the narrative. But instead, he fought it, he resisted, and now the narrative is that he was trying to protect Trump or other powerful Republicans from embarrassment. That's terrible optics. It makes Johnson look weak, scared, and complicit in a cover-up, and it undermines his authority as Speaker, because if he can't control something as basic as whether a vote happens, what can he control? This whole episode has damaged Johnson's credibility and made him look like he's not really in charge. That's dangerous for a speaker. It emboldens opponents. It makes your own caucus question your leadership. It creates an opening for challenges. Third thing, this is devastating for Trump politically, regardless of what's actually in the files. Think about it, even if the files don't reveal anything criminal, even if they just show that Trump knew Epstein socially and attended some parties with him, the mere association is toxic. Epstein is one of the most reviled figures in recent American history. He ran a sex trafficking operation that victimized dozens of underage girls. He had powerful enablers who helped him get away with it for years. Anyone connected to him is tainted by that association, and Trump already has significant baggage on issues related to women. The Access Hollywood tape, the E. Jean Carroll case, multiple allegations of sexual misconduct. Adding Epstein connections on top of that creates a pattern that's really hard to defend. Democrats are going to use this to paint Trump as someone who associates with predators, who enables abusive behavior, who doesn't respect women. Fair or not, that's the narrative. And it's going to be everywhere heading into 2026. Every Trump rally, every Trump endorsement, every Trump appearance is going to be shadowed by questions about Epstein. Democratic candidates are going to run ads about it. Progressive groups are going to organize protests about it. It's going to be a constant drumbeat. And Trump can't just ignore it. He's going to have to respond. He's going to have to explain his relationship with Epstein, defend his actions, try to distance himself from the worst aspects of Epstein's behavior. But every time he talks about it, he keeps the story alive. He keeps Epstein in the headlines. And that's exactly what he doesn't want. So he's trapped. Talk about it and keep it alive, or ignore it and let opponents define the narrative. Neither option is good. Fourth thing, this creates massive divisions within the Republican Party, because not everyone in the GOP is equally invested in protecting Trump or keeping the Epstein files secret. Some Republicans are genuinely committed to transparency. Some are worried about their own re-elections and don't want to be associated with a cover-up. Some are Trump critics who see this as an opportunity to weaken him. And some are just exhausted by the constant drama and want to move on. So you've got Republicans breaking ranks on this issue. You've got some supporting the release of files while others resist. You've got public disagreements about how to handle it. And that division is exactly what Johnson was trying to avoid, because a divided party going into 2026 is a weak party. It's a party that can't execute a coherent strategy or present a unified message, and that's bad for electoral prospects. Fifth thing, the bipartisan nature of this push for transparency is really interesting. because usually scandals like this break along party lines. Democrats attack, Republicans defend, and the public divides accordingly. But this is different. You've got members of both parties saying these files should be released. You've got conservatives and progressives agreeing that the public has a right to know, and that bipartisan consensus makes it much harder for anyone to dismiss this as a partisan witch hunt. Trump can't just say this is Democrats trying to take him down. Johnson can't say this is a political hit job, because Republicans are supporting it too. That takes away the usual defensive playbook and forces a different kind of response. It means the substance of what's in the files actually matters. You can't just spin your way out of it. You have to address the evidence directly, and that's uncomfortable for anyone who has something to hide. Sixth thing, let's talk about the legal implications here, because while a lot of the focus is on political embarrassment, there could be legal consequences too. If the files show that anyone aided or abetted Epstein's crimes, that's potentially prosecutable. If they show obstruction of justice, witness tampering, perjury, any criminal behavior related to covering up Epstein's activities, prosecutors could bring charges. Now, to be clear, just knowing Epstein isn't a crime. Just being in photos with him isn't a crime. Even being friendly with him isn't a crime. But if someone knew about his trafficking, helped him access victims, lied to investigators, or otherwise participated in the criminal enterprise, that's a different story. So depending on what's in these files, we could see new criminal investigations, new charges, new trials. That's a real possibility. And for anyone named in the files, that's terrifying. Because even if you're ultimately not charged, even if the evidence doesn't support prosecution, just being investigated is destructive. It damages your reputation. It consumes your time and resources. It hangs over everything you do. So the release of these files could trigger a cascade of legal consequences that we can't fully predict yet. Seventh thing, the timing of this is really important. We're heading into 2026, midterm elections. Republicans are trying to figure out their strategy for keeping or expanding their congressional majorities. Democrats are trying to figure out how to win back power. And this Epstein files release is going to happen right in the middle of that political cycle. That means the revelations, whatever they are going to shape the midterm narrative. They're going to influence how voters think about candidates. They're going to provide ammunition for campaign ads and stump speeches. If the files are particularly damaging to Trump or other Republicans, that could shift the electoral landscape significantly. Swing districts could flip. Moderate voters could be pushed away from the GOP. Enthusiasm gaps could emerge. All of that impacts electoral outcomes, and Johnson knows this. That's why he was so desperate to delay the release. He was hoping to push it past 2026, so whatever fallout occurred wouldn't immediately affect elections. But he failed. The vote is happening now. The files will be released well before voters head to the polls, and Republicans are going to have to deal with the consequences during the campaign season. Eighth thing, this whole episode highlights the power of public pressure and survivor advocacy, because one of the key reasons this vote is happening is that Epstein survivors have been relentlessly pushing for transparency. They've been speaking out, they've been confronting politicians, they've been demanding accountability for everyone who enabled Epstein, and their voices have cut through the political spin and forced action. That's really significant. It shows that even in a system dominated by powerful elites, even when leaders want to keep secrets, sustained public pressure can force change. So, where does all of this leave us? Mike Johnson tried to stop a vote on releasing the Epstein files. He failed. The vote is happening. It's going to pass, and the files are going to become public. Trump is facing renewed scrutiny about his Epstein connections, right as he's trying to maintain control of the Republican Party heading into crucial midterms. Johnson looks weak and complicit in an attempted cover-up. The GOP is divided on how to handle this, and the whole political landscape is about to be shaken by whatever revelations come out when those files are released. Is this the end of Trump's political career? Probably not. The guy survived scandals that would have destroyed anyone else, but it's another body blow, another scandal, another crisis that consumes time and attention and resources. And at some point, the cumulative weight of all these scandals becomes too much. At some point, voters get tired, allies get exhausted, support erodes. Maybe this is that moment. Maybe the Epstein files are what finally pushes Trump over the edge. Or maybe he survives this too and keeps fighting. We'll find out soon enough. But one thing's certain, Mike Johnson is absolutely stunned by how this played out. He tried to protect Trump and other powerful figures by blocking transparency. He thought he could control the narrative and prevent the vote, and he was wrong. The momentum became unstoppable, the pressure became too intense, and now he's watching helplessly as the very thing he feared most becomes reality. The files are coming out. The truth, whatever it is going to be revealed, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop it now. Welcome to the next chapter of the Epstein saga. It's going to be explosive, it's going to be messy, and it's going to dominate political coverage for months. Buckle up, because this is just the beginning. Stay tuned.